Hey guys, so yesterday we were focusing on what we think. Should the United States rebuild Japan based on evidence about Pearl Harbor, based on evidence about, um, just the results of the war with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So today we're actually going to be able to address the standard fully because we're going to be looking at the role the United States actually did play. Y'all kind of gave your opinions. We looked over those results at the beginning of class. Now we're going to actually see, okay, well, what did the United States do? How did they help? Did they help? So let's take a look. So, first of all, when Japan lost at the end of World War II and they finally admitted defeat, the United States kind of took the ball on this one and they led the rebuilding of Japan. And as you can see in this picture, it was not just the United States working on it. They actually worked together with the Soviet Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, and then some joint efforts. Some of y'all may be surprised that right now they're dividing up Japan with the Soviet Union and China, but at this time, keep in mind the Cold War was not going on, so this was not a big deal. They were okay with this. And what's good is when they divided it up, they set a specific timeline of how long each country was going to be responsible for helping rebuild the country. And the United States, even though they were sharing responsibility with rebuilding, they led the plan. They created the outline, they created the timeline, so they were running the show. They were the ones in charge, not any of these other three countries. It was mainly the United States. So there was one guy in particular from the United States that was kind of given the responsibility whether he liked it or not. So between 1945 and 1952, a gentleman called General Douglas A. MacArthur was the gentleman who was told, hey, just FYI, we would like you to be responsible for rebuilding a whole country. So yes, the United States was responsible for rebuilding Japan because they felt guilty after, the results. So between 1945 and 1952, General Douglas A. MacArthur did lead these reforms. He helped do the repairs of Japan. Now, some of y'all may be thinking, well, they didn't just not get punished, right? Well, they were punished, and you're going to see how they were punished. But keep in mind, they didn't want to have a repeat of what happened with Germany at the end of World War I and have a Hitler come to power. So let's focus on, okay, well, how did the United States help rebuild Japan politically or with its government? So these are a few of the big things that happened politically. First of all, they became a constitutional democracy. They became a constitutional monarchy, if you will. So not only was it a democracy, but they still had an emperor. They still had a ruler and a king in power, but he was just a symbol. So they had a constitutional monarchy just like in Great Britain. And not just any constitutional monarchy, but very similar to Great Britain. They actually ended up having a parliamentary democracy. So it was kind of a combination constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy. So since it's a constitutional monarchy, parliamentary democracy, they created a constitution. The nickname for it is the MacArthur Constitution because since, he's the one who was running the show, they're like, hey, let's give it a fun nickname. So they named it after him. Big thing, before World War II, women could not vote, and in the Constitution, they allowed that provision. And as I'd mentioned before, Japan became a parliamentary democracy, aka constitutional monarchy, and since they were parliamentary democracy, they have a parliament called a diet. Yes, I know that sounds like a funny name, but that is the name they gave it. Not only that, they restricted a lot of powers and abilities in Japan. So first of all, they did restrict the police power, trying to make sure that citizens had a little more freedom, but also they have really very strict gun control measures to the point where The only people in Japan who are allowed to have guns are police officers, but only if they are actively on duty. That means if you clocked in and you're on the job, then you can use a gun. If not, it's illegal. So they have very, very strict gun measures. So military, this is probably the one where you're like, they kind of started with Pearl Harbor, so what happened as a result? So first of all, big shocker, the United States in this plan completely got rid of Japan's army. Japan currently, and starting at this time, did not and does not have an army. They don't. Doesn't exist. None. Also, any officers that participated in World War II, they cannot become political leaders because apparently what was determined was a big issue was the military had way too much power over the government. And they were using that power a little too much. It was a problem. Not only that, but as you can see in this picture, they actually had war crimes trials. That means they felt like a lot of the officers, a lot of the military officials were very cruel to POWs, prisoners of war. And so they put them on trial. They were punished, and their punishments varied from death to jail time. It varied. Now, this is another one that might shock you. Japan cannot declare war. Doesn't matter the circumstances or the situations. They are no longer allowed to initiate war, declare war, or do any moves that would be a sign of, hey, I want to fight you. I want to get in war with you. Not allowed. So y'all are probably, after looking at this first bullet point and looking at this last bullet point, kind of being like, what? So how is Japan supposed to defend itself? Well, the United States provided for that. The United States protects and supports Japan if it's threatened. Like if North Korea looks like it's trying to attack Japan, we intervene, and actually we maintain an active military presence. All right, so economic. Y'all are probably like, okay, well, how did Japan get so powerful? How did they get to be such a strong economic power? Well, first of all, we just made the economy more democratic. And also keep in mind, if you don't have a military to fund or use money for, all the money that would have gone to the military just automatically went to the economy, honestly. So the biggest thing, they made farming more democratic, meaning instead of businesses owning the farming, individual families and people owned the farms. The United States actually provided money and funding to support the industry. So not only did Japan have extra money because they no longer had a military, they also were given money from the United States to help strengthen and make their economy better. Also, like I had mentioned before, the United States purposely tried to change laws to make it where businesses could be created, entrepreneurs could be successful, and try to encourage a more market economy or where businesses and citizens have more say in the economy. Another big feature was the United States encouraged workers' rights and workers' protections, and that means the creation of unions where workers have a minimum wage, health care, hours, and stuff like that. Social. So these are three big ones. So first of all, schools are more democratic as a result. Before World War II, the government pretty much controlled any content that went into the textbooks, meaning if there was anything that made their government look bad, they purposely did not put that in there, or they would just skew facts to make it where they looked better. Or they would completely censor things that did not agree with, the Japanese imperialist ideal. Also, newspapers and magazines were no longer controlled by the government, but they became independent businesses. Like here in the United States, all newspapers and all businesses are controlled by independent countries, independent people, not independent countries, independent companies and independent people. It's privately owned. The government has no control or say. Whether they like it or not, it's privately owned. They don't like what's being said, too bad. It's owned by a business, not by the government. Also, democratic ideas and values were encouraged. So more people having independent say, people being able to vote for their leaders, people being able to participate more in the government and the economy. And particularly the biggest thing was they're now a constitutional monarchy or a parliamentary democracy. People vote for parliament, parliament chooses the prime minister. The emperor or the constitutional monarch, His role is passed down from generation to generation, but again, he's more of a symbol. All right, so now that we've kind of had an overview of what the results were, it is your turn to reflect and think about this. So in a moment, if you need another shot to rewatch this, to get some things, to get notes, that's up to you. You do that. Do what you need to do to get the notes you need, to get the information you need. But once you're ready, you will need to get your signed iPad, go to the Flipgrid app, enter in the code that you will be provided, and you're going to create a response. You're going to share information you learned about how did the United States help rebuild Japan. Share an interesting or shocking fact and kind of explain to us, why did it surprise you? Why was it shocking? And then finally, do you agree with the final result? Do you agree with the way the United States ended up rebuilding Japan? And if you do, explain why. If you don't, explain why, but also just kind of give some evidence that we pulled from yesterday, that we pulled from today. Now, to make sure that your responses are good, make sure you use your rubric to evaluate your response. Make sure you have a good response so it's going to be properly graded, because this is going to be a quiz grade. Your Flipgrid response is going to be a Flipgrid grade, a formative grade, okay? Your videos should be no more than 3 to 5 minutes long. Please do not make them very long. If you just follow the rubric and you follow these 3 guidelines, it should take 2 to 3 minutes, all right? So, look forward to seeing your responses and see you later.